kind of like to start with all the applause just to get that out of the way. Yeah, there you go. That's it. That was the start from the applause. We'll work on that. I am a healer, and I'm a broken healer, and I'm not into. It gives me a different perspective. You know, I'm not really into like the exercise scene, like you're working with people who are functional and making them more functional. That's not really what I do. I love that. That's fine. I have things to say about that. But my interest has always been the margins. And so in terms of powerlifting, my interest was always the basic structure, the basic kinesiology, the basic presence, the basic technique, because I never got very far. And it hurt a lot. And so I like to look at a certain point in my life, I discovered, I just realized that I had lost a lot of what I had. And I understood the reason why I had lost it was because of sedentarism. And I saw that happening to my mom. I saw that happening to little kids. I saw that happening to all my clients, my siblings. And as a special educator, my goal was to see genius in everybody, you know. What a fun thing, see everybody's genius. As a healer, my goal is to see their bodies and to care enough to see the pathologies that we ignore. And I feel like I'm putting my finger in, you know, a dam that's breaking. But, you know, I still got my finger in there. And as I went through my research and my exploration of myself and of the literature and of the science and worked on my clients within the limitations that I have, I developed a set of theories, a set of principles that worked for me and worked for my clients. And I want to share a little bit about an exciting new development in anatomy. And so, but this kind of gets at some of the stuff that I want to talk about. This wonderful monkey is demonstrating sit-ups for us. It's an excruciating thing to look at. It's a video, and it's just an awful, horrible thing to do to a monkey. And we know that sit-ups aren't even any good. And so we did not evolve to do sit-ups. We didn't really evolve to do planks, to do all the things that we have to do in this world as compensations for the fact that we don't have free movement. So my goal is, so there's a concept in the research on the sitting disease epidemic called NEAT. And it's non-exercise, activity, thermogenesis, abbreviation. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And the point is that, look, you can be sitting all day and then go to the gym, and you're still going to have all the effects, the physiological, hormonal, chemical, musculoskeletal, electrical effects of that prolonged sitting. And what we need instead of going to the gym for an hour is this, just more generalized movement. Get up and down out of your seat, get up and down off the floor, just to have a kind of a general higher level of metabolism and movement. So, you know, I'm not going to teach you about exercise, and I'm really impressed, but I try to get at essentials. So we're going to talk about the deep core. You can go to the next slide. The deep front line is an old anatomy trains concept. Not old, anatomy trains is new. But the deep front line has been around. And in his original work, Tom Myers identified it as a kind of a core, but he's come out recently, and other scholars have come out and really talk about how this is a genuine core. So who here has heard about the new deep core or the deep front line? Has anybody? Yeah. And what do you think? What do you think is the core? What does it mean, the core? I know it's an obvious question. And then what do you think the deep core means? What does that mean to you? The deep core. Well, it's pretty simple, you know, but just what do you think the deep core I mean, have people heard the concept of the deep core?
I've heard of it, but I haven't put that much thought into it.
Yeah.
It's the deep centralizing mechanism. It's like your main organization system that's closest to your spinal column.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, and it's very exciting. So it is the muscles, like for example, it's the psoas instead of the abdominals. The diaphragm, the pericardium, the anterior cervicals, and the tongue. But of course it's in the pelvis, so the psoas runs down through, and we'll talk about it. Maybe you can go to the next slide and see if it talks about it a bit more. So it comes down through the pelvis. The psoas, of course, does. And there's this powerful connection through the pelvic. You don't really get the pelvic basin in this image, but the pelvic bowl, the pubococcygeus and the levator ani and etc. It's kind of, that's a little beyond my ken, you know. That's really deep stuff. But it's the pelvis. And then what's really interesting about it is that it has to be grounded on the earth, right? Your core has to be grounded. So it runs through the feet. The path that it takes is, of course, the medial line, right? The adductors, importantly the adductor magnus, because of the posterior attachments for extension, and runs down through the medial thigh, through the deep compartment of the calf, right? Those structural muscles underneath the soleus and the gastroc, whose attachment comes behind the medial ankle and into the medial arch, into the entire plantar fascia of the foot and the toes, right? Tom, Dick, and Harry. Tibialis posterior, flexor digitorum, and flexor hallucis. So it's kind of exciting because it connects the core throughout the body. We have a different sense of a core, but we also ground ourselves in it. Can do the next one, see what it says. What this is about is a general paradigm shift in anatomy. And of course we know that's a bicep, right? And so the new anatomy is functional, and the new anatomy is, I want to say it's embodied. What I am interested in is embodied anatomy. I think there's a big difference between saying my pectineus or my coracoid process, you know, with talking about, you know, the armpit, or something that kind of feels meaningful to me, right? And the people that I want to reach out to, I mean, these are, you know, there's a lot of people out there that need to understand some of these basic points. I want to find a language that can relate to them, something that works for them. We love the geekiness, but we have to boil it down, right, to essentials. So this line is the deep and superficial front lines instead of the biceps. And then we have the deep and superficial back lines. And for example, we can identify a lot of people are in this position all day, and they don't know why they feel pain here, you know, and sometimes they don't know why they feel pain in their thumb. They don't know why they feel pain here. And, you know, I explain to them, well, I do a Hulk Hogan thing. And what does he do? You know, we laugh at him, right? And then what does he do next? He stretches it out. But we're still laughing like this all day. So I call it the thumb pit line. Thumb pit. The pinky back. You have the pinky toe butt line. And then you have the big toe crotch line. So I don't know. I just made those up in a moment. But they're important functional lines. And the point is, how can we use the new anatomy to live better in our bodies? So next slide. Already talked about this, how the core is rooted. This is the medial thigh. It's an abstract line, but it's rooted in the medial foot. Now, Tom Myers will argue that it's rooted in the whole foot, but I'm going to emphasize the big toe. Next slide. And this is just a little bit about the posterior tracts of the deep front line. That's the deep, these are the deep compartment of the calf, the tib posterior, and etc. The hamstrings, not the hamstrings, the adductors. And it's very, very complex. You can get into the anatomy in a lot of detail. I actually don't bother. I love it. But for helping myself and helping my clients, if I need to go there, I will. Next slide. The psoas is interesting. The psoas, we think of the psoas, we know there's a lot of discussion around the psoas, and we talk about, its actions, and we talk about the kind of somatic, somato-emotional role of presence that it plays in the body, that it's a very, very sensitive organ. Liz Koch would say, you should never touch it, just work around, be very gentle. So, and in terms of the function of the psoas, we think of it as a hip flexor, but really, why would it be attached to T12 through, L5 if it wasn't a spinal stabilizer? So that line runs up through the pelvis. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the sitting disease. I didn't get the slides in here. The sitting disease epidemic is a subject of a lot of epidemiological work. It's a very intense field right now for epidemiologists working almost exclusively in physiology. Some people have written books about it from the viewpoint of biomechanics, Kelly Starrett, Katie Bowman, and other people. But understanding how when we compress these tissues, we compress the major arterial supply, and we create friction and irritation within the arteries of the body, the major arteries of the body, and this directly leads to atherosclerosis and heart disease. Many, many, many problems are associated with sedentarism and the compression of these tissues, which turn off. One researcher calls it, they turn off like a dead horse. And if you've experienced sitting too long, you feel the pain, and you can feel an unease and a kind of a dull pain in the legs. You don't really know where that comes from. What is that? And some people will sit more as a result because it hurts. I call that a false reading or the fatigue cycle. And but what I think is really interesting for us is the biomechanics of the sitting disease epidemic, the musculoskeletal issues. And for me, at least, most of my clients come in with this kind of complaint. And we know upper cross, lower cross, right? So it's pretty simply upper cross and lower cross. Most people are pronated with a compression of the chest. They're locking their scapula down with their coracoid process. They're moving their arms from here, and their neck, their head is weighing heavily, head forward position. Does that make sense? Do people agree that that's a very common pathology? Incredibly common. This is why we have the epidemiology, because we never saw it in kids. Now we see it in kids, and that's why the clinicians are going nuts. Upper body like this, lower body is going to be like that. Does that look pretty common if I'm sitting in a chair? Kind of, it can either be rounded this way or this way, but we have this spreading of the groin, spreading. Most people are going to laterally stabilize laterally. And then we're going to be on the outside of the feet. To add insult to injury, we're wearing shoes that bias us towards the lateral foot. And, we got bunions and stuff like that. So all of this is an insult to the core. And when we adopt a habitual position like this, we get massive tension through here, right? We have low back issues back here. And we evacuate the core, right? The traditional core and the deep core are evacuated. this becomes very weak, and the feet become distorted. Let's go to another slide. So let's start with the feet. The interesting thing about the feet is that basically what we're seeing in people is devolution. Devolution from an upright obligatory or a gait obligatory body back to what's called a compliant posture. So we have within us the epigenetic or the phylogenetic history, of course, going to the other primates who don't have a fixed first metatarsal, a fixed big toe, and they have a very compliant foot, very compliant gait. They're very powerful, but this doesn't describe what we want to look like. It's great to look like that in certain settings, but if we lose that rigid core, then we've really lost a lot of our humanity. So this is talking a little bit about the evolution of the foot. The last common ancestor had a big toe like that. And whatever remains they could find, there's a general shift to the positioning of the big core so that it becomes rigid, to the big toe so that it becomes rigid. And we have a rigid big toe that allows us to be efficient movers. That's not something a monkey can really do. And so what happens is that we lose that. And we lose that big toe. How many people have bunions? And here you go, you're working on it. That's cool. So for me, that's an attack on our humanity. Shoes are like an attack. And so, yeah, I feel so sorry, just talking my brains out. So it's really important. I'd like to invite you, wherever you are, maybe to stand up. And I want to invite you to do what I call a power pose. And really stand in your feet. And I want you to really stand in your feet. Stack your joints really well. You guys know how to do this. And I want you to come into your feet and really find that big toe. Really give extra attention to the big toe. And move it a bit. The prayer poke is what I call it. I do this for scapular awareness, but there's a good reason to do this. Come into those big toes, and then see if you can come from the big toe up into your crotch. See if it leads up in there, and see if you can feel that. Does that seem instinctively obvious to you as athletic, fitness people? Is that instinctively obvious? No? No. Yeah, so it really is a bit of an important point, the big toe. The rest of the foot is equally important, but it's the big toe that's under attack. The big toe is kind of the gateway to the core. So that big toe, that line leads up through the medial arch right into our crotch. And through that, through the muscles of the crotch and the structure, through the deep pelvis, then into the psoas, the lumbar, the viscera. Formally speaking, the deep core it's a space, and it includes the viscera. But we can just talk about the psoas. And it's going to lead up through the diaphragm, through the pericardium. It's going to come into your throat, the deep anterior and posterior muscles of the neck, and finally the tongue, as well as the tissue. I don't remember the name of the tissues back in the skull. And So I want to invite you to really feel that. And I want to invite you to understand that that is really under attack. That is really, really under attack in this world. People don't know. They don't know that their core is being violated. Next slide, let's see what's going on with that. Here's a human foot. Feel your big toe. Reach down and touch your big toe and drag your hand up that big toe bone and see how it connects directly with the tibia. That big toe comes directly up the tibia. It is a huge power line. It is a hugely important power line. The big toe in the push-off phase of a sprint measured with a cadaver is 119% of body weight, exerts 119% of body weight. The next one, which is on the same anatomical line, is 28. It's twice as wide, 4 times as strong as any other toe. It's really important, you know. Now the pinky toe is extremely important too, but it's a little less under attack. Okay, let's see the next slide. Here you go. Hammer toe, bunions. This is a picture of a foot in a normal shoe. This is a picture of a foot in a nice healthy minimalist shoe with a wide toe box. And this one is talking a little bit about the foot tripod. And you guys know about the foot tripod. So the foot tripod is a little bit of a complex thing. We really want to remember, what's his name, the parkour guy, was saying, feel in between the two balls of the forefoot. But what I'm going to say, that's very important too, but what I want to emphasize, what I emphasize with my clients is, there's a simple structure to the foot. It's a tripod. You know, think of it as like a chicken. You can easily relate to your foot if you understand that tripod structure. How many people find themselves on the outside of their feet a lot? Sometimes, right? The reason is that the body is powerfully biased to stabilize laterally. In the absence of better stabilization, it's powerfully biased to stabilize laterally. Makes sense, right? Yeah. Next one. So, what does that mean? If we're powerfully biased to stabilize laterally, what do you do? What do you do, right? With what we know. So, massive hip pain here. How many people have had that kind of deep pain, unrelenting pain right in there? Or in the yeah, right? Or in the SI joint or the lumbar. And if you look at the muscles, where do all the muscles run, right? It's this line. Boom, right here, right? Pinky toe. And right now that line, is it short or long with me? It's short. That posterior line is short and tight. And this is weak and long. So if we understand the importance of the big toe, its connection with the crotch, then we're going to understand that we need to protect and maintain this medial core line through here. And so anything that you do, if you're feeling off balance, come into that tripod. Very often when I can't find my balance, if I come into my big toe, I lock down. You know, I don't have the balance in the training you guys do. And you know what I'm saying? So for me to find balance is a big deal. And it's a simple thing. It's a simple thing. So we know that if we have an imbalance in the back, tightness in the back, where are we going to have, what's going to be the opposite of all the tightness? Now this is the pelvis. This is the pubic symphysis. It's facing you like this. This is the front part of the sacrum, right? This is back here on the back side is where we have all that pain and tightness. On the back side of this, the head of this femur here, around the head of that femur, running up that lateral line. So what would be the opposite of this joint? What?
It would be lax in front.
Yeah, but what's the opposite of this joint? What would be the opposite if we're tight here? So where's the front, right? That's the front. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious. Okay, it is obvious. You know, it's totally obvious.
So you're talking about with the tightening of the structures, namely posterior line of the leg and glutes, and how they insert into the sacrum, into the fascia of the sacrum, that we're
And head of the femur.
destabilizing. But we're destabilizing the pubic symphysis.
That's what I'm saying. And the pubic symphysis is the line of the deep core, and it is most attached to your medial arch and your big toe. So if we want to tone our core, we don't do sit-ups. We bring the big toe back online and work with the crotch. So you get into the position that B's in, and this is a great cure for low back pain. Get into that position and squeeze from the crotch. You can squeeze your legs together from your lateral rotators back here, right? Squeeze it from the front so that you feel the leg kind of, you turn the legs into each other. Try that, squeeze real hard. Squeeze your knees together, squeeze your ankles together, squeeze the metatarsal phalangeal joint, the big joint of the big toe together. Really squeeze it. And you should feel a swelling for men under the scrotum. I don't know what to say for women. You feel a swelling deep in there. Squeeze that. Yeah. And you can do it on your back. You can do it in any position. And it was finding that cured my low back pain, my hip pain. You know, it took a long time, but at a certain point, just things popped. Like really deep shit, I don't know what it was, my sacrum popped. And my femoral acetabular syndrome.
A lot of times people, like the practitioner I worked under, did these similar sorts of activations as a form of like muscle energy, where the imbalances that he saw was primarily to do with the pelvis, and how it was more like a rotatory imbalance. But one of the things that they did after a number of muscle energy techniques was they finished with the dual midline activation, referred to as a shotgun. So both sides squeezing inwardly, restoring the central line after doing a couple of other things. It's like one of the main tenets of the pelvic stabilization or balance.
Probably relieved and opened up the posterior stuff.
People get like sacral adjustments and pubic symphysis adjustments to really actually feel pops when those things happen, as far as things like restoring some sort of alignment.
Yeah.
You know, when I actually train the middle splits, I'll feel like my SI joint just kind of.
I don't know what a middle split is.
Oh, like where you're not, instead of like legs front to back,
like that,
like you do
yeah,
like
cool.
like Jean.